Welcome back to the Gooner Fanzine Arsenal Women podcast. Apologies, we've had a week or so away. It's been a bit of a nightmare. Daisy and Lumia living it up over in beautiful Switzerland. We're not very jealous at all. Of course, the football's good enough, and then the scenery just looks completely average. Rather just be back in England, of course. And we'll be watching the final, of course, from home tomorrow. You'll be in the pub, and I think those two are over there. I think Leif might even have managed to get a ticket and a flight over there. I'm not sure. I think he might be going over. We're going to focus on the Euros next week. We're also going to talk about Arsenal's fixtures, starting against London City, finishing at Anfield. I was very worried we were going to have to finish the season at St Helens, but finishing at Anfield is very good. And I'm sure we can make a night out of that somehow, as is end of season tradition. We'll talk about that next week and the Euro final. Do comment your predictions now. We're recording this on Saturday, just gone midday, with the final tomorrow. We're guaranteed to have an Arsenal winner, which is always good. Always nice to have a player coming back, becoming a European champion. But one player who's training already is Olivia Smith, 20 years of age and the first £1 million female footballer. I mean, Izzy, the fee is obviously what makes the headlines, but how big is this signing for Arsenal purely from a football point of view?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. We've played against Liverpool a few times this season, and she's had a real impact for Liverpool, and I think was a real challenge to play against. I think a lot of those Arsenal players probably enjoy playing against her, but they'll much prefer playing with her on the same side. And I think she was one that everyone really enjoyed watching in her first season in the WSL, and she's a really exciting young prospect. And it's just fantastic to add someone like that to our ranks, and not even to mention the huge fee. It's just a great signing all round.
Yeah, Arsenal's winger options have been good, but not enough depth, and maybe not one who's completely a bit different. They've almost got a lot of 7 out of 10 wingers, haven't they? And now it seems they've got this, the joker in the pack, if you like, the player who's got a bit extra, the player who's got some different qualities to those before. 9 goals in 25 games for Liverpool last season. She was voted their player of the season. 16 goals for Sporting Lisbon the season before. That's what sort of earned her the move to the WSL. I like the fact as well, I remember when she moved to Liverpool, I saw a few people saying, why aren't Arsenal going in for this? But Arsenal's recruitment almost seems to be, you look at Van Domselaar as well, they seem to quite like a player who, maybe moves to that mid-table WSL club first and then have a look at them, allow them a season to adjust to English football, and then almost that's what Arsenal need to then make the decision on the player. And obviously Smith has settled in really well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really clever strategy because you're making sure that they suit the English football setup and they're able to compete in the WSL, and rather than just looking at how they've performed abroad. And Olivia Smith has proved time and time again that she does suit this English style of football, and she's able to be physical and meet the demands of the WSL and all the other domestic competitions going on. So I think that's really smart business from Arsenal to have a look at these players, in the setup and then see if they like them to join for the following season. And that's perfect, and it's worked out really well. So I'm really excited to see how Olivia Smith develops at Arsenal. She's still super young. She can still be taught different Arsenal ways of doing things. And I think potentially maybe will score more goals than she has at Liverpool because of the other attacking strengths around her who'll be able to help her perform. So I can't wait to see.
What do you like about her then? Is it the pace but also that skill? I think Katie McCabe found that out the hard way, and certainly in the FA Cup game between Arsenal and Liverpool. What does she bring that's maybe a little bit different?
Yeah, well, I think she obviously works well in a team setup, but I do think that she's a good individual player. When she's on the ball, she can sort of make changes and change the game. She is able to drive through players, as Katie McCabe found out. If you're able to beat Katie McCabe, who's pretty tenacious and she really goes for it with her defending, then you must be pretty special. So I think it's really exciting. She's clearly got a lot of drive and ambition and is able to play with a lot of freedom, I feel. So that'll be a nice thing to add to this side of maybe Arsenal's team is full of quite a lot of experience, but it would be nice to add these young players who are a bit more free, potentially like Olivia Smith.
We're talking about a lot of transfers on this podcast, and with a team like Arsenal, the question becomes how do you fit them all in? Always nice when there's rival fans going, "Oh, Arsenal don't need Olivia Smith. They've got enough players, and there's no way they're going to manage this." And it's like, "Oh, what a horrible problem to have." What a horrible problem to have. You worry about us, and we'll work out as an Arsenal, perspective how we're going to do that. But how do Arsenal do that? Obviously, more Champions League games, looking to compete for the WSL, looking to compete for, all four trophies and whatever this FIFA Intercontinental, whatever that is as well. If you want to throw in a fifth, I'm not getting too excited about that just yet. But my first thought was Olivia Smith and Emily Fox. That's going to be some right hand side. But, Chloe Kelly has had a great Euros, had a great time with Arsenal. Beth Mead, of course, as well. Caitlin Ford, as we said, had an outstanding season for Arsenal. It's just all about the options, surely, now.
Yeah, and we've got loads of options. I think that's really nice. You obviously don't want to waste talent by leaving people on the bench and leaving people out because it's nice to see everyone getting minutes. And I think that all of those different options bring something different against different opposition. So that is a really exciting problem to have. I think it's been nice to see Chloe Kelly in the Euros. She's been playing on the left a bit. That could be another option there. And then you've got Beth Mead, who hasn't potentially played as many minutes as she might have liked to in this Euros campaign, but when she's come on, she's had a couple of good moments. So she'll continue to bring that experience to Arsenal's right hand side. But I think bringing in this youth, and we've seen it with Cara Cooney-Cross, for example. She had a great beginning of the season this year as a young player that Arsenal have brought in, and she's maybe learned the ways that Arsenal do things. And then she's been able to contribute in these big moments. And I think it's just about having all these options and being able to, put up the right people and work out which groups work well together. Like maybe Emily Fox and Beth Mead, if Beth Mead spoke about how they've been working on that in training as a partnership, but potentially they'll be in a position where you need someone a bit more physical. And Emily Fox and Olivia Smith what might work well together, as you said. So I think it's just about Renee Slegers working out her combinations and looking at who we're playing against and seeing what's going to work. But yeah, a brilliant problem to have. You can't have too many good players, can you?
No. And in terms of the fee, then, the first men's £1 million footballer in 1979, Trevor Francis, going from Birmingham City to Nottingham Forest. Now, he won consecutive European Cups, scored the winner in the first. So, Olivia Smith, you don't have to worry about that because Arsenal have won one without you. So, I guess if history repeats itself, she'll just win one again, or maybe they'll win three in a row. But it took the women's game 46 years. Further down the line, we were getting closer to that fee. And for all Arsenal have done sort of off the pitch, and they are in a good financial state, in terms of the women's team, maybe surprising that it's taken this long, but also they've picked out the right player, haven't they? Liverpool said, look, she's our best player. We really want to keep hold of her. You're going to have to pay big. And Arsenal have gone, look, we think this is worth it. And also, again, for rival fans worrying about the money, you could say you've got Olivia Smith for free and you've paid £1 million for Chloe Kelly, Mariana Caldente, Alessia Russo, Taylor Hines, and Anneke Borbe. You'd say that's great business, wouldn't you? Because at the end of the day, you have to add up, you get your spreadsheet out and think, actually, all these free transfers, it means you free up, surely, don't you? The money for an Olivia Smith.
I know, and I think everyone sort of sometimes takes the mick out of Arsenal for signing so many free agents and going, by the way, you can spend money in the transfer window, but actually they've just been quite clever and they've
Mm.
noticed that there's a lot of this talent that's out of contract and they snapped them up. And I think, you look at all those players you've just mentioned, they've all been absolutely brilliant for Arsenal. So yeah, £1 million for all of those. I'd definitely take that deal any day. But it is brilliant that it's Arsenal that's broken this record because as a team that are breaking records in women's football so often, attendances and just leading the way in the game, really. I think that it's only right that it is Arsenal that spends the most money and break the transfer record, and hopefully other teams will follow suit and it'll just keep growing.
Just finally, only I think it was Viviana Sei was the only player who won more fouls than Swift last season. She's still got a scar on her leg from one particularly bad one. Liverpool complained to the PGMOL sort of about the lack of protection from officials, the bad officiating surrounding the player. How do you see that developing with Arsenal? Because obviously they do go to a bigger club. I don't know how that changes the dynamic. I probably haven't watched Liverpool regularly enough to know how valid these claims are, but certainly seeing clips of some of the fouls, and as we mentioned with Katie McCabe, it's a good sign, isn't it, when a player is fouled as much as she is? I think particularly in the women's game where players are less likely to just throw themselves to the floor. It's not like a Jack Grealish when everyone says, oh, he wins so many fouls, but we know why he wins fouls, because he goes down so easily. I quite like that as a sign. And for Arsenal, how do you manage that as a coach in terms of protecting the player, and how do you see it developing?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good sign because it shows that defenders are trying to do anything they can to stop her, and that she's pretty much then unstoppable if they're having to foul to stop her on the ball or stop her making these runs. So I think that is a good thing. I think that I don't know how Arsenal will handle it going forward. I guess it'll just have to be a bit of trial and error because I don't know if they've had to make complaints like that before for other players at the club. So it'll just be about going into the season and making sure that the team structure is set up so that players aren't having to foul her. And I don't know how they go about it, but I think it is something that they'll look at. I think they are good at protecting their younger players, and so she'll go into that category. And I guess maybe they have a bit more pull as a bigger club and they'll be able to make statements and if these issues arise, which we hope they don't. But yeah, I think that they will protect her, and especially they've spent that much money on her, they're not going to want her getting injured by other teams fouling her or injuring her. So yeah, I think it'll be something they'll look at, but I don't know how best to do it.
Yeah, nice to have a Canadian player back. Arsenal Canada on Twitter. I remember when we had D'Angelo and Lacasse were one of my favourite accounts, sort of interacting with me whenever they were doing well, and I sort of tweeted them saying, good morning. We have another Canadian. They said they're incredibly proud, and yeah, another player's got to jet around the globe for international duty. When we talk a lot about sort of Emily Fox and then the Aussies as well, it's another player who's got going to be racking up a lot of air miles. She made a Canada debut at 15, which just reminds me of Martin Odegaard. Actually, he did it. I think the same. I'm pretty sure he was 15 when he made his debut for Norway. Might even have been younger. Um, we reported this a couple of months ago that Arsenal were set to begin talks with German goalkeeper Anneke Borbe after her departure from Wolfsburg. Another free transfer. She became Wolfsburg's number one midway through the season when Tommy Struik said he sort of preferred her to Merle Froms. I hope I pronounced that right. Now, both of those goalkeepers left at the end of the season. Wolfsburg then brought in Stina Johannes from Frankfurt, and I think they've brought in a couple more goalkeepers as well. Never a quiet day over there in Germany with Wolfsburg the last couple of years. I think for many, sort of when I broke the news, people saw this as the end for Manu Zinsberger. Is it? Because at the moment, sort of, I've heard nothing of a potential move for her. I'd imagine there'll be clubs who are interested. I'd imagine she's open to the possibility because she became Arsenal's number two. Well, how do you see this developing going forward?
Well, yes, I was thinking about that. I'd kind of forgotten about the goalkeeper situation because the Euros has kind of taken over. And then I saw the pictures of the Arsenal women back in training and Manu Zinsberger looking incredibly happy in her number one training kit. So I think that she is probably, as you said, she's open to hearing from other clubs, but also probably quite happy to stay at Arsenal. I think she's quite settled. She really loves the club. She loves being there, and I guess she's had a season on the bench as a number two, so she knows what it's like. And if she's not desperate to move, then she clearly doesn't mind that too much. She was called upon in some big Champions League games, which didn't always go completely to plan for her, but in the end it worked out. And you could see her in those celebrations, how much it meant to her and how much she enjoys being an Arsenal player. So yeah, I don't know what it looks like. I imagine she'd be such a good number one somewhere else, and I don't know if she's a bit wasted on the bench because we have seen her had some absolutely brilliant moments for Arsenal, and I'd love to see her excel somewhere else because she seems like a really lovely person and a really passionate player. So yeah, I don't know, but I don't think it is the end. I think she's going to stay for another season.
I think as well, Arsenal would be quite keen to have her around the group. I mean, everything I hear is positive, and people actually say there's a real possibility of her going into coaching as well. They think she's very, very good with young players, sort of supporting the young goalies who go up and train and just being that positive presence around the group. She gave an interesting interview with Flash Score, which I put up the other day. She said, I think it would be a lie to say I think being number two is great. I can cope with that easily. I had to find my feet first. I was number one at Arsenal for 5.5 years. I don't think my performance has dropped. It wasn't easy to deal with. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The team comes first for me. We saw everything out of the coach anyway. It's not nice to be number two right now, but I'll keep pushing. I'll stand up to it and give it another go. I'll also make the most of my time in London and work even harder to show what I'm really capable of. And you never know, things can quickly change in football. Now, my understanding, I'm pretty confident that Naomi Williams will go out on loan. She was meant to in January. I think she was pretty frustrated, as you can imagine. She's barely kicked a football, for Arsenal at senior level, and the club basically said we don't see see us having a third choice goalkeeper to facilitate her to go on loan. They obviously do have those numbers now, and I think she needs a full season elsewhere. How then, if Arsenal do keep Zinsberger, how do you manage your number two and your number three both feeling they have valid claims to be your number one? Because we know, I mean, it's a weird one, isn't it, with Borbe because she was Wolfsburg's number one, but I don't know how much you can read into that because she went in the summer anyway and they got another goalkeeper and there was probably a bit of politics behind the scenes there. Zinsberger is rightly Arsenal's number two because of how well Daphne van Domselaar has done. I don't know how you do the hierarchy here, and I don't know how you keep Zinsberger and Borbe happy. I really don't.
Yeah, I really don't either because these are two goalkeepers that have had a lot of experience at senior level. It's not like you're talking about a young goalkeeper who's not played as a number one before. They're both going to want to fight for that spot. And when you've got three people fighting for one spot that is pretty much going to be the same every week, it's a really tricky situation to balance. And I think Rennie Sleggers has got a bit of a problem on her hands there because that these are two players who have said, like Manu said, she's not loving being number two and she thinks that she's still got something to give. Well, it's going to take Daphne van Domselaar to fall from quite a high height for that to happen because she's been so outstanding for Arsenal this season. And you just see, look in the Champions League final, how amazing she was. She is that level that Arsenal need between the sticks. So I do worry that Manu Zinsberger's moment might not come again. And then you're looking at Anneke Borbe coming in. I think it's interesting that she has come to a club like Arsenal when maybe from an outside perspective, it's quite obvious that Daphne van Domselaar is that number one and there isn't room for someone else to take over right now because she's still young and she's still got many years left in that position. So yeah, I think it's a really, really tough battle and maybe it's good because they compete against each other and they might raise each other's level just by having that competition. But yeah, I think it's a tough choice for Renee Segers there, and I'm intrigued as to why we've gone down that route.
Yeah, a couple of academy goalkeepers who've been training with the first team the last couple of years, but whether the Arsenal feel they are ready to be a number three if Zinsberger is to go, I'm really not sure. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. I think there is enough football where you can bring in your second goalkeeper this season. But certainly the way Zinsberger finished the season, I don't think that's going to fill fans with confidence. Borba's going to have to adjust. I don't think she speaks a lot of English. She's meant to be quite shy, and I think coming to terms with the language is something that she'll have to do fairly quickly. Although it can be easier for goalkeepers, I suppose, in that slightly different position. But yeah, interesting. Zinsberger only 29 years of age, so as you say, a lot to come in her career. Just quickly, Freya Godfrey departing a reported six-figure fee. Catherine Batt in the Telegraph broke that news a while ago. There were a couple of clubs, I think Villa were interested as well. Just good business that for Arsenal. We talk about the options out wide. I think there's no way, with all respect to Freya Godfrey, that she's going to be knocking on the door for regular football. And then she goes back to London City, who she helped win promotion with, and she'll face Arsenal on the opening day along with Taya Goldie.
Yeah, I think it's a great bit of business. She obviously had a successful loan spell at London City this season, and it's not too far from home. It's not a massive adjustment, but she's getting that WSL football, and that's really exciting. They obviously see her as a big part of their setup if they're willing to pay a fee like that. And Arsenal obviously valued her enough to sell her at the right price. So yeah, I think a great bit of business, and I wish her all the best because excited to see how she develops. She's a nice product of the Arsenal Academy, but as you said, too many options who are stronger at the moment on that Arsenal side for her to stay around and have any chance.
Yeah, I was at Crawley when I think she made her first start in one of the weirdest Arsenal teams you'll ever see. It was right in the middle of that ACL season where Arsenal reached the Champions League semi-final. And I think it was her, Gio and Palova were sort of up front with Jodie Taylor in like a false nine role. It was quite the side. There were players everywhere. All over the pitch who were just in completely unfamiliar positions, and how Arsenal got to the Champions League semi-final, I have no idea. And yeah, Godfrey, she did play last season in the Champions League as well, which is good. She made a European debut away to Vålerenga in the freezing cold. So just finally, Arsenal have been quite deliberate, haven't they, in terms of Hines, Borber, Smith and Kelly. It's very much been a block of signings. To get all of those done before the Euros is good business so far.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's it shows intent, it shows ambition. I think didn't want to they wanted to straight off the back of winning the Champions League, kind of use that period of where they're a very attractive club to come to bring in this talent, make these signings, and get business done before the Euros, where everyone's away, it's all a bit up in the air, and you don't know who's going to be there, and I think it's great. It doesn't disrupt any of the players at the Euros. So yeah, I think it's really exciting. It'll be nice to see the full squad back after the Euros in a couple of weeks' time, and yeah, I think it's going to be a really exciting season going forward for Arsenal. They've got these brilliant new signings, some young, some with some good WSL experience. And I think it'll be a really fresh look in order to go and challenge for that Champions League and to try and win a bit more domestic silverware, which I think is what the fans are all desperately after now.
Now, one final rumour from Amanda Zaza, who's a very good Swedish journalist, normally spot on, is Amanda. She said, sources within England tell me Rosa Kafaji was spotted visiting Brighton. She's interesting because I know that's where Daisy had a selfie with her about a month ago. Our intrepid reporter was enjoying a day by the seaside and bumped into her and Laia Cadena. So I wonder if there was anything in that. Unfortunately for Kafaji, she won't be playing much football there as they play most of it in Crawley, but I know they're building that new stadium for the women's team only. I doubt that'll be there in time for this season, though. I'm not quite sure what the latest is. But Brighton had a good season, obviously thrashed Arsenal towards the end of it. And this seems, certainly when you look at Michelle Agyemang's loan there and what that's led to, we're going to touch on her in a minute. This seems like another good move and a sensible one for Arsenal. It's hard to see Kafaji playing much football. We talked about Smith adapting to the league in her season there. I think a full season loan, maybe with that clause to come back, in January, should Arsenal need her or require her if there's injuries. I think that's another good bit of business.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that looking at her and how little minutes she's had, I think she really does need to go out and get used to the WSL and just learn a bit more about playing in England, because I think that time I spoke to Rennie Slegers at Crystal Palace away, and she was just saying how Rosie Kafaji likes to come on and just try and prove herself by doing everything. And she's almost saying she does too much. She's trying to score a goal. She's trying to play in midfield. She's trying to get back and defend. And I think that is natural when you haven't had very many minutes. You want to prove that you can make an impact. But I think it will be great if she goes somewhere where she's confident that she's going to get regular playing time and doesn't have to just sit on the bench. So I think a really good move. I really enjoyed watching Brighton this season. They could really bring it to some of the quote unquote bigger teams and cause these upsets as we saw against Arsenal at the end of the season. So yeah, I think that'll be a really great place for her to go. And maybe there was something in Daisy's selfie.
Yeah, we'll have to ask her. And I don't think like Cadina's going there before someone to me about that. But well, you never know. Maybe it was just a day by the seaside and the Brighton manager was wandering along. But certainly they've had a good season and interesting because we're going to talk about Agyemang now. Which I don't know if Kafaji going there would affect her also going there, but Arsenal certainly strengthening, not a direct rival, but if Brighton push on, have another good season, then you never know. I asked Carla Ward this the other day. I was very privileged to be on the Guardian's Women's Football podcast, and they said, "Oh yeah, Carla will be joining us." And I was thinking, "Who's Carla? I don't know a journalist called Carla." And then I thought, "Oh goodness me, the Ireland manager." And I thought, right, I better be on my game here. But it also gave me the chance to ask her about Michelle Agyemang because I think this is almost a head v heart decision. Because I think for our hearts, we say, "Get this player in the team. We want her banging the goals in. We want her playing at the Emirates." She's doing this for England. She can do it for Arsenal. And then with our head, especially because of the form Stina Blackstenius is in, Arsenal's raft of options, and the risk of Agyemang not playing, does the risk of her sitting on the bench all season outweigh, I guess what would happen if she went away and had a good season somewhere else? Because even at Brighton, she didn't start. I think she only made 3 or 4 starts. So almost all of her football, apart from playing for Watford at sort of the Championship level, has been as a super sub. Now, do Arsenal see that and say we want to keep her as a super sub, or do they say actually she's got more development to do? Let's come and have another look at her in a year's time, and by then, who knows what sort of player she's going to be?
Yeah, you're right. It's a really, really tricky decision. And I think that seeing someone be play so well in a tournament, it just is so exciting. And you just desperately want her to come and do the same for Arsenal. But potentially week in, week out in the league, being a super sub is not going to develop her very much as a player because I think you need to have these starts and you need to have these minutes in game where you're just seeing it out or you're trying, or you have to score multiple goals or just different scenarios. And I think that being on loan would benefit her, maybe somewhere other than Brighton, but she looked like she had a really lovely season at Brighton and it might have really suited her. And maybe after this tournament, they would see her in more of a starting role. So you never know, but it would be a shame. Well, we guess we couldn't play against her if she was on loan somewhere, but it would be a shame to see her strengthening another team when we've seen all the potential she has. But she is still super young, and I think with Stina Blackstenius in form, I wonder whether we'll have to look at whether she's in form for Arsenal, whether she was just in form for Sweden, because sometimes she plays extremely well for country and then isn't able to have the same impact back in North London. So maybe Michelle on loan was an option to come back in January, for example. But I do think it's a really, really tough one, and I'm sure that there's a lot of conversations happening surrounding her at the moment.
Yeah, I was reading the Guardian sports pullout today from their main newspaper, and they sort of had a few players, England and Spain, looking at each other as you do, promote the final. And Spain's biggest player, on there physically was Aitana Bonmati, and the player staring in her eyes was Michelle Agyemang. And at the start of the tournament, you'd have thought, what on earth's going on here? Why is it not Russo or Lauren James or anyone like that? And people have been calling for her to start for England, which I don't think will happen. But it is a remarkable tournament, isn't it? And she just seems to not be flustered is the wrong word, but it's a lot going on for a 19-year-old when almost the hopes of the nation are on your shoulders. But she just seems so composed, so mature through it all.
Yeah, she seems really, really composed when she comes on. I think she knows her role, and that's the same for all these subs in the tournament. They know their role, and because with Serena Wiegmann, it's very clear what everyone is there to do. And she comes on, and I think everyone was slightly biting their nails, going, "Oh my gosh, that these subs are too late." In that game against Italy, it was looking like we were going out, but they found a way, and Michelle Agyemang found a way. And I think what a brilliant strike, great initiative, and really seemed. And I was watching it with a couple of fans football fans who haven't necessarily watched a lot of women's football, and they were going, "Oh my gosh, she's the best player on this pitch. She's amazing." They could just see the talent, and I think she has got that raw talent and that intuition to just play football and play really freely. And I really love watching that with her. But yeah, I don't think she'll start tomorrow in the final. I don't think Serena Wiegmann's going to make many changes, but I'd love for her to have another national hero moment because she really, really deserves it.
What I'd love is for Arsenal to just, even just for like a pre-season game, just go 4-4 effing 2 and then just have Russo and Agyemang up front and just walloping it long for half an hour at the end of the game. Just see, because, you could see that being a point of attack, maybe in years to come. And yeah, going to be really interesting. I think she's proving she's not just this big physical striker that almost Serena Wiegmann was talking her up to be. And I think we shouldn't be surprised by that, looking at her finish against Belgium, technically she is so good. And be nice to speak to a couple of her former teammates as well who've just said they are just so, so proud of her, but also not surprised. And sometimes it's nice to hear that as well, because I think as a country and as Arsenal fans, we're surprised, but I think people who've played with her for years and years aren't. And Carla Ward's take as well was very much that she should go out on loan. Which I thought was, from a sensible manager's head. I do think Arsenal will sway towards that, unless perhaps there's an injury to a Russo or Blackstenius, God forbid. But yeah, very interesting. And choosing that lone club as well. I think it was either Carla Ward or Susie Rack on the podcast said maybe even looking at sending her abroad, which I hadn't actually considered, but almost taking her away from being a direct rival because you want to send her to perhaps a better club than Brighton, with all respect to Brighton, but you don't want to, to send her to one that's going to be too good. So really, really hard decision. And one that's just become so much harder because of how well Michelle's done at the Euros. So yeah, really interested to see plenty of conundrums for Renee Slager's Arsenal are back in training. My understanding is they have a behind closed doors friendly next weekend, either a week today or a week tomorrow. And then so really starting to get the pre-season preparations going. I don't think the Euros players who were knocked out earlier are back in training yet, but I'm sure it'll be in sort of the next week or so. Izzy, great to talk. Where are you watching the final tomorrow. I'm not going to ask you a prediction because there's just no point. It's going to be a head for your heart thing. But we're guaranteed an Arsenal winner, so that's something. So Mariona Calente or Michel Agyemang will have the Ballon d'Or.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not going to give you a prediction because, as I said before we started recording, I've been having nightmares about it. So, yeah, I'll be in the pub. I've got a few non-football fan friends coming. I'm hoping to convert them. So, yeah, it's going to be a good day and hopefully a good day for England. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, be very careful what beer you drink, of course. Anything Spanish is strictly not allowed. Although I
Yeah,
did break that curse because, when we conceded against Italy, I looked down in my hand and I realized I had a can of Italian beer. And I thought, this is all my fault.
it's your fault.
And I thought, what have I done? And then when they turned it around, I thought, oh, this is good. Maybe I have broken the curse. So I think I'll stick with the same beer. I'm not going to risk anything Spanish tomorrow. But yeah, very
It's gonna
much.
be there's gonna be a lot of superstitions going on tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'll wear my new England shirt. No, I haven't worn it yet. It's not happening for the final. So yeah, I think I'll give that one to my mate.
I'm trying to think what I did in 2022. I think I did a bike ride and I went for lunch somewhere and then cycled back just in time for the final. And I can picture not sitting on the sofa for much of it. So I'm going to have to pace around the front room. So maybe we're just going to have to do that again. But yeah,
You're gonna have to get your
incredible.
bike out.
Yes, I think I am. It's just amazing that this England men and women just seem to not play particularly well, but just keep getting to these finals, and I think that's going to serve them well. But yeah, I just think that I'd love to see the odds of a Michel Agyemang winning goal against Spain, and please no penalties. So yeah, we'll touch base again next week. We've got a much quieter week next week, and talk about the Euros, talk about Arsenal's fixtures, and any more news. So Izzy, enjoy the final tomorrow, and good to catch up.
Thank you. You too.